Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, where we're going to be answering the question, can you even switch systems if you want to? We're very happy to have you all here today for a fun twist on your standard webinar. Rather than read a bunch of PowerPoint slides to you, you're going to get to be a fly on the wall for a candid conversation between two equipment dealership industry experts with decades of experience between the two of them. So I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. First, we have John Andersen. He has over 35 years of practical experience in the heavy equipment industry, and he's also a chief evangelist for many of the industry's leading DMS providers. And John will be joined today by Lloyd Farnsworth, who's Director of Sales at DIS. And Lloyd has been working with dealers to help them meet their software needs for over 25 years. So these guys have a lot of insights and opinions that they're looking forward to sharing with you today. And before I hand the floor over to our speakers, there's a few housekeeping items that we need to cover. First, today's webinar will be available as a recording after the live session, and we'll send you the link via email within 24 hours, so you can revisit it or share it with anyone who couldn't make it today. And we would also love for this webinar to be interactive. So if you have any questions for John or Lloyd, please do send them using the Q&A window at any time during the presentation, and they'll be happy to answer them throughout the conversation. And if we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be able to follow up with you afterwards. So please don't hesitate to ask us anything. And finally, please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar, as your feedback is very valuable to us. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, John and Lloyd.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Lloyd, I'm sure you took it the same way I did when she started adding up the years. Basically, she's being very polite in saying that we're old. Well, listen, when we started talking about this a few weeks ago, and it came up in conversation when we were talking about the challenge of migrating from one system to another, or the challenge of staying on the system that you have, my thoughts on it were pretty straightforward. But I have to tell you, the more that I've ruminated on it, and the more that I have had some interesting experiences as of late, I think there's a couple relative ways to look at this. So when people talk about changing systems, it's generally in a moment of frustration or admiration. So it's one of those two. And the frustration being, geez, I want my system to do this. My system doesn't do this. If only my system would do this, it would be the perfect system. And of course, the admiration is looking over at a neighboring dealer who may have a feature or a function or supplying some kind of services to their end customer that you don't. So where I'm going with this, Lloyd, and I know that you know I'm under a bit of a handicap now. I've got a broken wrist on this side, and it happened the day before I was moving into a new place. And I have to tell you, it's a lot like switching systems. It happened out of admiration. Initially, before you go to look at a new house, it's clean. There's no clutter in it. It's been staged perfectly. It's been prepped for everything that you need to see. Every light is on, every window is open. It's being flooded with natural sunlight. It's actually shown in its very best possible light. And I think that's the case when people look at systems too. So you and I both know, because we've done it before, we've done demonstrations together for a number of different software packages. A good operator, a good consultant, a good salesperson can make a system sit up and dance, but there's a practicality to it that you have to be prepared for, that says when the demo is over and when the rubber hits the road, it's a lot of work. And personally, that's where I'm at today. I'm in a sea of boxes. I don't know how I didn't count the fact that there's 14 steps upstairs every time I need to move everything. And I think it's the same way when people talk about I need a new system, and should I get a new system, and what's involved in getting a system. You really want to be clear before going in. And I'm looking at your notes here, and I think that's a great starting point of questions that you need to ask yourself when you're making the consideration to stay or the consideration to go. I think it's a bigger question.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what I've coached dealers on for decades is, first of all, there's no perfect system out there. They don't exist. but there's always a lot of good reasons to consider switching systems if you can. And the hardest thing for most dealers to do is to apply that logical framework to sit back and go, okay, what is it in my operation that I cannot do today, and what does that mean to me? In other words, and you've heard me say this to dealers before, am I trying to fix a $100 a week problem, a $1,000 a week problem, or a $10,000 a week problem? And that's kind of the first place to start, to say, look, this is what I'm trying to understand about my current system that it's not doing for me. Then focus on solving that problem, and that's your value for switching systems, and never lose sight of that, because that's kind of the literal light at the end of the tunnel to go through the painfulness that is change. And anybody that tells you that switching softwares is not painful is likely to fib about other things too, because it is a challenge.
Well, I'm sure it's the same. It's the same across every industry. If it looks too good and sounds too easy, it generally is, or it's going to be really expensive and an expensive proposition to do.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think maybe just to give us some kind of framework, because you and I could sit here and talk about this forever, because we've done it a number of times to and from a number of different systems. I think maybe if we go through the notes and talk about, why these are, first of all, I'll tell you why it's a question, and then maybe you can tell me what the answer is.
Sure.
So if we look at number one, when we're talking about specifically your DMS provider, and are they in it for the long haul? Anybody who follows me or any of my podcasts on Learning Without Scars would come up and know that I am not particularly satisfied with where the market is going in terms of the suppliers. And by suppliers, I mean the DISs, the CDKs, the HBSs, the number of people that are working in this market. Because last year we went through a consolidation where two major players became one major player, which is oftentimes good for the customer. But in this particular case, my concern was, are they doing it for the betterment of the customer, or are they doing it for the betterment of their share value? Because in that case, they're a publicly traded company too, and owned by an investment company that looks after them. So.
Well, but publicly traded isn't a bad thing. I mean, DIS is owned by a publicly traded company too, but with an absolutely 180-degree opposite approach, which is be in this for all software companies that are part of Constellation for the long haul. Look after every business, have them learn from each other, help them grow their own business by sizable amounts over time, and get the benefit of that culture. A lot of other people in this industry, especially in the software, and the funny part is we even see this in dealerships now, they're getting bought by private equity, which technically is publicly traded, but the mandate is 100% profit by quarter and flip the company or IPO it for profit as quickly as possible. That's all they care about, because nothing else matters to them. And that's the problem. There's no real commitment to the industry long haul at all.
So then, in my mind, the difference is with what's happening at DIS and Constellation. They're building a portfolio and building a future in the business, as opposed to trying to grow the business and flip it somewhere else. Is that your perspective? You've got more insight than I do in this particular company.
Oh, it's absolutely the truth. And anybody that wants to research it can go research into the private equity companies, should say, that are doing the buying up of the software. It's easily to find out, and they can do the same thing for Constellation. And they're literally diametrically opposed in philosophies. And dealers who have traditionally relied on multi-generational relationships with their customers, in a lot of cases, look to the long haul, and they may not realize that their software company's been sold out from under them and is no longer remotely interested in their best interests at all.
Perfect. So then I guess I understand question number one, and it is a long haul game, without a doubt. And I think it's important to do your research on who owns the products that you're looking for and what their track record is.
Absolutely.
So I didn't even read number two till I put my head down, which is, again, is it a track record in the industry? And I guess that's part and parcel with question number one, but I think it's question number two more so than just financially. Are they vested in the industry? Are they somebody that's been around and in this marketplace or adjacent marketplaces, or considered the same general industry? And are they bringing that kind of track record with them? And is their track record to grow dealerships and do the best things they can for dealers?
Well, the answer is there's only about call it 7 or 8 providers in our industry that can say that yes, they've been in it for the long haul, they're dedicated to dealers. But further down the list, this is where it gets interesting. Okay, so you can say yes, these people are dedicated. Well, but if they're now owned by private equity, their dedication is completely suspect. And so that happens down on the large side of it. So then you go, okay, well, they theoretically are large enough to have the money to put into development to produce products that dealers want, but all that money's got to go to pay shareholders, right? So that's handcuff number one. And if there is a provider of software in this industry, and there are a couple that are too small, then they've got the opposite problem. They're dedicated, but they're too small to have enough resources to invest in new products, partnerships, all the rest that they need to grow. And so you've kind of got a sweet spot in the middle of trying to find the right software company that's both got the resources to dedicate to build, buy, or partner software as needed, and is committed in the long term, and is not constrained by having to keep that profit engine fed in order to maximize ultimate value of flipping the company or IPOing it.
Okay, I'm going to take your word for it, because my experience was always with just a DMS that wanted to do the very best that they could to take care of their customers. And I think that's probably the first thing that you want to look at before you get enamored with how far up the chain they go, and are they multinational, and can they multilingual, and do they provide services in Europe and South America and everywhere else. I really want to focus on what's happening locally. Do they know about my associations? Do they belong to the same associations I do? Are they operating in neighboring dealers? Are they operating in my state? Do they have other satisfied customers? So I'm going to move along, Lloyd, to number 3, because I think this is the most important part. Software is just part of the equation. In fact, if you say there's 7, and I'll narrow it down to 4 that I know intimately and have worked with very closely over the last 35 years. And the success in all of those organizations has been how they can support the customer after they sell them the software. So, no software is trouble-free. You're constantly have an evolution and changing of staff members. You have various levels of operational experience. You're bringing new people in. Having regular and consistent support clearly is kind of straightforward, and you'd think it's a regular that comes with everybody. So what is it that you want to ask specifically if you want to find out about what kind of support levels a supplier has?
Typically, the 2 questions are ultimately going to be, where is your senior support kind of based, and how much experience they have in our industry? Because that's really what matters the most to any dealer, right? Are they based in North America, and do they talk my dealership language? And have they been doing this for enough time that I don't have to explain my business to them?
That's I can tell you it's fun to talk to a dealer when they call up and they say, hey, I have an inventory question, and my inventory is out of balance. And your question is, okay, so which inventory? Your parts inventory, your equipment inventory, your rental inventory? And they say, well, it's my equipment inventory. And I'm like, okay, so is the subledger out of balance in your equipment inventory, or is there a specific stock number that you can't reconcile? And they pause and they look back at you and they go, did you say stock number? I said, yes, or asset number or serial number if you want, but we have to start looking at the subledger and how to balance it with the complete goods inventory ledger. You only have to get that far into a question before you understand that the person you're talking to on the other end of the phone either understands your business or doesn't understand your business. This has got nothing to do with pharmaceutical sales. We're not working in a a retail environment where people are coming in and just randomly purchasing items. It's very specific industry, and I think the challenge right now is people are looking for kind of a fits-all software. So we have some manufacturers coming in from the outside world with an ERP solution. The ERP being an enterprise resource planning solution, basic set of tools in a great toolbox, whether it's Oracle, Microsoft. There's a lot of people that will come to the market with that application and say, oh, well, we can build what you want. My experience has been, and you and I both had this conversation in the last week, building it is great. Understanding it is what takes time. Programmers are easy to find. People that understand the industry and understand what's happening in the industry make it a little tougher.
Well, but by the time a dealer has spent a lot of money and 12 to 18 months explaining to those generalized systems what they really want to get out of them, the industry's already changed again. And you're having to re-establish, hey, by the way, this has also happened. So you're always playing catch up, and you're always having your checkbook out to pay for someone else because you have to teach them your industry. That's the challenge with 98% of the ERP systems out there.
Okay, so let me ask you about question number 4. Specifically, how do you know and what's the best indicator that your software supplier is focused on your success and not their success?
I would say the biggest indicator will come down to proven benefit analysis for their products and recent enhancement experience. When they can say, by the way, we've released the software enhancements in the last 2, 3, 6 months to do all these things, and this is where they make dealers money, and you can talk to dealers to say, yeah, they are making me money, that's what you have to count on. Because that's
okay.
the surest indicator that you're in it together.
I've heard you do this before. And for anybody listening, in case they wondered, Lloyd and I don't rehearse any of this because I'm going to put them on the spot now. So can you give me an example of something that you could take to a dealer that says, hey, listen, here's an opportunity to recover money that you might otherwise not have recovered that would help you either decide you want to keep a system or change a system with some kind of a financial justification, not pie in the sky, oh, buy me and you'll love it. I mean, real hard fact. Can you give me an example?
I could give you several. So let me try and pick one. One of our dealers used our, it's been out for 12 months now, our analytics software, coupled with a change in their own internal payment bonus program for their technicians to say, hey, using analytics, they zeroed in on where the technicians were efficient, each individual technician right down to the machine level, and said, we're going to incent you to get better at this. So the guys that are 63% can get up, the guys that are 88% can get up to the 90s. And they tracked it, and in the space of 1 year, they improved their overall efficiency across all technicians by 16 percentage points. That amounts to tens of thousands of dollars a month for that organization. Example of what that means to a typical dealer. If you can improve, they improved 16% in 1 year. If a typical dealer improves their efficiency for a technician 5%, it's 8 hours worth of time per month at $100 labor rate, and most dealers are charging more than that. Just make the math simple. So it's $800 per technician per month just to gain 5% more efficiency from a tool like analytics, which again, the dealer I quoted you had got 16%. So that 5% number is a very conservative number. If I have 10 technicians in my dealership, then I'm talking about a 5% gain in efficiency using analytics being $8,000 a month. Is that worth paying attention to and changing a pay plan, bonus plan, using analytics to track to get that level of benefit? I don't know. Most dealers are going to say $8,000 a month bottom line is worth it. Is that a good enough example for you?
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, and I think the best part about that, and the part I enjoyed the most, and hearing you go through it, because I hate numbers and I was lost at the first one. But when you talk about efficiency and you talk about technicians and you talk about billable hours and you talk about costs and you talk about expenses, you came back and just highlighted the point about finding a dealer that speaks your language, or a supplier that speaks your language, somebody who understands your business and what it is. Because it would be really easy to say, let's talk about analytics because it looks good and it has great pictures and people like it and it's friendly. The fact that you can tie an absolute dollar value to a process makes a really, really compelling case.
Absolutely.
If so, and I guess I think I understand question 5 on here about being large enough, and I'll tell you why, because my history was with a small software provider with PFW, and we grew that business to the point where it became capitally intensive for us to be able to take on the market that we needed to. So it's often difficult for a supplier to take on customers that in some cases are bigger than they are. And you don't want to be in a position where the tail is wagging the dog. So maybe can you make me a little more comfortable about how DIS size-wise can compare and what resources are behind them that'll enable them to be big enough to stay in this market for the long haul that we talked about?
Well, I made the comment earlier. The key phrase that I like to summarize for dealers is you have 3 choices in software business. If you're really going to look after your dealers, you either build, buy, or partner, right? Meaning you've got the resources to build the necessary software. You have the resources, if you can't build it and there's somebody that's best in market, you can buy that company, which Constellation does every single month, right? Buying up key software businesses across the world and adding to the portfolio. And then the last is partner. And again, you need resources and typically some money to be able to do that. And as an example, DIS has done all 3, even in the last 12 months, to partner with certain creative companies that have got best in breed software to fill a gap that some of our dealers have identified. We've built some new enhancements or new product completely like analytics. And we've also gone out, not us directly, but Constellation has bought other companies, which we're now looking at integrating into. Does it add to the DIS portfolio for what our dealers want us to provide? And so it's rare to find some software provider that can literally say, we've got the resources to do all 3 of those, to build, buy, or partner as needed to look after our dealers for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think it's interesting because there's a separation when you talk, and it really, I'm answering my own question for point 6, which is, are they small enough? Because in your mind, in the way that you just described it, you can separate DIS out of the business model enough that DIS is in fact small enough to know who their customers are, to understand their customers, and to care about their customers, but still have the resources of Constellation behind them that'll allow them to grow. So I'm not even going to ask you about number 6 because I think I just described it myself. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's the ability to have the capital and have the depth of your roster, and I think that's really interesting. And when you were talking about Constellation, their acquisition strategy, that there are adjacent markets and places where there is some synergy, and if it makes sense, you can partner with somebody else kind of underneath the same umbrella to better your software at the same time. And there's no question about that. That's a great benefit. I think that the question 7 is really kind of the part that gets me frustrated regularly, and it could just be because I'm old and this is kind of my industry and I've been here forever. But we talk about pedigree, and every year I go to the trade shows, and there's always somebody new who's coming in, matching shirts and sneakers. They're ready to take the market by storm. What's the value in having been around as long and having the experience of some of these legacy applications? And by the way, when I say legacy, a lot of times you'll hear people, kind of grimace when you say, "Oh, you just called me legacy." Legacy is around legend, and I'm perfectly comfortable being described as a legend. And I think, there's a reason that longevity is there. How do you feel about the pedigree of DIS and the history of DIS? I know it, but that's because I'm old. How do you explain it to somebody new?
20-second answer, 44 years of growth, of buying other companies, even before 7 years ago being part of the Constellation group or being brought on board to Constellation. So DIS's pedigree has been exactly as you said. It's outlining a steady growth pattern right up to when the legacy of DIS as a company said, okay, we've got to be, now it's time to sell out to Constellation, who can take us to the next level, and continue that growth pattern, continue that commitment to the dealership industry and the four industries, sub-industries that we operate within, and do that for the next 40 years. And that's the beauty of the model we're under now. The commitment's there, and we will both support all legacy softwares within our family as long as needed, which again is unique in this industry, but more importantly, provide growth opportunities to enhance, potentially, and if needed even, change software within our own offerings as dealers need them. That's the beauty of the DIS model.
And that's the beauty of 44 years worth of experience.
Yes.
I mean, so when this industry inevitably has a downturn or an upturn, that experience enables people like DIS to respond appropriately, and a little less of the sky is falling, chicken little approach, because we've seen that this cycle happen 8 years ago or 12 years ago or 14 years ago and kind of know what's coming.
Yeah, and not to interrupt, John, but I just realized, sorry, as I'm looking through our list, the one thing that didn't make it to the list, which is actually most important now that I think about it, was when we talk about switching systems, we haven't brought up the whole concept of contracts. It never made it to the list.
Okay, so I can tell you about contracts because in the olden days, we just people were on a month-to-month contract. We provided them good service and support. If they liked you, they paid you. If they didn't, they left and went to another software package. And that was free competition, and that was constantly that was one of the ongoing concerns.
And I will tell you that that is the way that DIS operates today as well. If you're not happy with our software, then why would we force you to continue to use it? It is a free market. But the reason that I bring it up, and that we should have almost added that to the list, is that it is a huge concern with most other providers out there, including the largest ones in our space. They're all about locking dealers into multi-year contracts. And that really needs to be one of the topics we need to address in this conversation we're having, because dealers have to understand, first and foremost, look at your contract now and see how long are you locked into, and are you handcuffed more than you think? And the sooner you know that, the better, because it kind of tells you two things. One is that based on your contract, you better be planning ahead. You might have a very, very small window to switch systems, and that means you've got to be planning ahead to hit that window. And two, it tells you an awful lot about the nature of who you're dealing with when they're hiding that fact that they've got overlapping, multiple year contracts on different pieces of what you're paying support on. You might not even know that until you dig into the truth behind it.
So separate question, why would I want to sign? I don't know that I would want to sign a 5-year contract with somebody unless it was to price protect me, but I'd rather be performance protected instead of price protected. So why would a software supplier want you to be on a 5-year contract?
Well, ultimately it means they can count on the cash flow, and if they're owned by private equity, that's all that matters. The numbers are all that matters. So if a software company can go to the market and say, here is 90% of my customers, and the average span of contract is 3 to 5 years remaining, they've got a solid cash flow of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars that they can go to the market and say, see, these dealers are handcuffed. They can't go anywhere, and this is the money we can count on coming in literally no matter what. No matter how good we support them, how bad we support them, no matter how good our development or whether we don't do any development, no matter what we do in the market, if we trim costs and cut staff by 20%, we're still going to get that money. And that means that they can do everything they need to do to boost profitability and still say our cash flow is guaranteed. And that's what the market wants to look for.
So if you come back to one of our earlier points, this is the difference between grow it and pump and dump as opposed to being in it for the long haul.
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. That I don't even think that you're right. That wasn't even on the list. But let's talk about point number 8. And does it help you? Does the system earn its keep without penalizing cash flow? I think you answered that already for me when you gave me the service efficiency example. But on a bigger scale, is there a bigger general question behind in terms of how much is this going to cost me compared to how much am I going to make back? Because if I'm trying to justify the massive change that it takes to change business systems, I'm going to need a lot more than a 16% improvement in service efficiency.
Well, actually, yes and no. 60% service efficiency, if you've got at least 10 techs, is a phenomenal amount of money, an amazing amount of money. So that actually might justify things faster than you would believe. But I will tell you that one of the things that our whole DIS staff is behind is looking at multiple areas of benefit analysis to say, look, here are 5, 6, depending on which software you're looking at, 8 or 10 potential areas of benefit, and zeroing in to say, okay, here's a reasonable low-end assumption for your size of business that you can get within a short period of time of going through the hell of change, of changing systems. And to do a good job, you have to review each person's operation, each business that you're talking to, and say, okay, here's the top 3 of those 8 possibles. And then say that's our target, because we're making changes in these 3 areas for these 3 benefit reasons. And together, those benefit reasons amount to a whole lot of money, even at a very conservative level. That's where, John, it's important for dealers to say, I get it. This is my focus within the first 2, 3, 6 months of install to get these 3 things accomplished. And yes, I'm going to have another 5 other areas of benefit. I get all that. But if you focus on those 3 areas, then you're going to get back your investment in the pain of change and the cost to do the change. You're going to get that back within the first year by just doing that focus.
Okay, so I'm going to add to that one that we don't have on the list, Lloyd. And that is, if you're seriously considering changing systems, or in fact, if you're in the midst of changing systems, to or from, I think the most important thing to do is to take out a piece of paper and write on there the 10 things about your existing system that you absolutely cannot stand. Maybe part of the reason that made you decide you wanted to go somewhere else.
Or at least start looking.
Or at least start looking. And I think probably it would do you well to write down what the 10 reasons that you know, the things that you're looking forward to, the things that are going to change, much like you just said. If these are the 3 items that are going to make my money back, then put those on the list. I think you need to seal those and put them in an envelope and be prepared to open them on about week 8 of installation. And I say that kind of joking with my moving analogy, but I'm not enjoying it right now. And I know there was a reason that I moved. And I know if I switch systems, I probably at one point, there was something about the new system that enamored me and something about my old system that I wasn't quite so crazy about. The mind works in a funny way, though. Once you start that process, you immediately forget about all the things in your old system that you didn't like. So you can just remember fondly about, well, remember when I could do this, or remember when it operated this way.
And John,
the good old days before internet.
Watched enough dealers switch systems, same as I have over the years, literally in the hundreds. And the funniest conversations I've ever had with dealers is when they're in the midst of the install and go, but I want these screens to look this way, like my old system. That immediately makes me say, wait a minute, stop. We weren't going through all of this trouble to switch systems to make the new system look like your old system 100%. That's not a realistic expectation. So systems will look different. It's the functions that matter most. And so, yes, we all have to get used to, it's like driving a new car, or it's like switching from an Apple phone to an Android. You go, well, okay, it's different. I got to switch screens differently. I got to load software differently. I've got to do things differently. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why you're making that switch. To your point, whether that's sealing it in an envelope and opening it 8 weeks into install, I prefer a different approach. I prefer that if the salesperson's up front and has zeroed in with the dealer on those 3 of the 8 possible items that are the reason for change, then that should be communicated to an install team. The install team should communicate that to the support team as install is going on, so that everybody's on the same page. And the dealer's literally reminded every single day, hey, we're in this together to get you these 3 things for your business. That's
and I agree. I think that's critical, and that's a very positive approach. And this is what I like about you and I when we talk, because we come at things from completely different perspectives. The one I want to preserve is what your pain points were before you switched, because inevitably people forget what their points of pain are because they get replaced with new points of pain. And you've called it hell. Switching is no fun. And you'll get over it at some point. And that's why I think sealing it in an envelope and going, oh yeah, remember when I was dealing with one-sided journal entries? And I had to worry about auditors and things like that. Open that envelope and go, oh, well, I won't have to worry about that anymore. It kind of gives you a preferred approach to it. So I'm going to keep us moving on step or point number 9. So what am I allowed to say as a DIS customer to anybody that calls me today? Because you talked about your contracts are literally month to month. So I assume that if I don't like you, obviously my first recourse would be to tell you the problems I have. But if a neighboring dealer calls me and says, what do you think of DIS? What do you expect that, or I guess I know what you expect. Legally, what could the customer say about DIS?
Anything they want. Well, within reason. You obviously don't disparage individual people, because that's defamation.
That's just mean.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, we see enough of that on social media today. It's like, really? I don't know why people have to get in the gutter that bad. But regarding the company and regarding the software product, then DS customers are allowed to say whatever they want to whoever they want.
So that leads me to the question, because that's going to be one of the questions that you ask your DMS provider. Tell me how you're going to curtail my opinion or my ability to share my opinions within the industry. And I guess the logical question is, why would you want to do that? If you're happy, you can talk to everybody. If you're upset, you can't talk to anybody but me.
That is the way certain contracts are written in this industry with other providers.
Okay, so read the contracts carefully. That's the note,
Sure.
And that's the one we'll take away. Okay, so I'm going to come to point 10, because this is the challenge that everybody is faced with, and I'm sure directing a sales team regularly hear people go, hey, listen, great product, super demo, like everything you showed me, like everything you can save me, like the way that you can make money, but I'm just going to wait and see how this plays out, because we just had a mega merger. I guess we're going on 2 years ago now. And by the way, company ABC is going to release new software and come into the market, and they're going to change the way we do things. So I'm just going to wait it out. What's your response to that?
Well, twofold. The contracts aren't going to get any less onerous. You're going to have renewals that will handcuff you more than you even thought, in term and in ability and in your ability to say anything about it. So be very careful. The longer you wait, the more rigid your handcuffs are going to become. And the second piece of that answer is, the longer you wait, the more you're doing a disservice to your business, because what I just spoke to you about, those 3 areas of benefit, and we just talked briefly about one. So if the one we talked about, analytics for a fairly small dealer, 10 techs, and that's worth what amounts to be $8,000 a month. And there's a couple other areas of benefit. I won't go into the detail here. And I can think of one that would be worth about $5,000 a month, one that's worth about $3,000 a month. So I can look at all that and say, okay, just those 3 areas of benefit out of 8 possible, and I've got $16,000 a month benefit to talk about. Fair enough? Okay. We're talking just under $200,000 a year of benefit. Last I checked, most dealers don't want to wait. So you want to wait for 6 to 12 months. You just left $200,000 on the table that you could have put in your bank account. That's enough reason to say, wait a minute, maybe we should act a little bit sooner rather than wait.
Well, I think in this market, things are tight enough. Margins are tight enough. Competition is tight enough. Leaving $200,000 sit on the table just is a good reason. But I want to come back to this again. it was interesting to hear you discuss it. So we're talking about customers, the most valuable part of our business. Obviously, a dealership is going to tell you the most valuable part of their dealership is their customers too. Why do you have to use terms like handcuff and contract? And what happened to partner and collaborate and things like that?
Well, it's still the terminology we use within DIS, but it seems to be largely missing elsewhere in the industry.
Well, I can tell you one thing. If somebody comes to me with a contract, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to it now because, I can understand a year's contract. There's a significant investment that a supplier makes in putting somebody on a new system, and there's a huge investment made from the customer in changing systems, not just purchasing a system, but education and everything that goes with it. But I don't understand this incessant, the penalization, the whole handcuff idea, and curtailing what I can say about something, and not being able to share my opinion. Sounds like a rough way to start off a relationship.
Well, it's too biased in favor of the software provider, and that's not the way it should be.
Well, that's refreshing to hear. I can appreciate that. Sarah, I don't know where we are with our time, but we have gone through the points. Did you have any questions that you wanted us to field while we're here?
Hi, yeah, we've got about 15 minutes left in the hour. We do have a question that came through. Does my current provider control my data?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll make it even an even more complicated question, Lloyd. Everybody, I assume by now, is moving towards cloud-based computing. The days of holding your server, off in the storage room along with the mop and bucket and having somebody go in and do backup tapes every week, those are long since gone. So people have moved to the cloud computing, and it's being held on a shared server, or software as a service.
Right.
Who owns that data?
Well, again, it's going to depend on the contracts the person's signing. Typically, and I mean, based on the DIS framework, so to speak, the data belongs to the dealership, and that's what should be in place with any agreement. Some contracts that exist out there with some providers say, well, it's your data, but in order to ever move it away from us, you've got to pay, thousands and thousands of dollars for this, this, and this, and this. And so that is typically in a lot of contracts I've seen. If there isn't any proviso for it legally in the contract, then that's when a dealer needs to be worried, because then it's a case of, well, I need to make certain that my data, that is my business, literally the core of my business, is mine at all times.
And so if I'm operating in a software as a service model or a hosted model right now, what's my likelihood that, because there's 5 or 6 dealerships all in the same hosted model, that are we sharing data? Is it held exclusively for me? Do I need to be concerned security wise or anything like that?
Rarely in this day and age, because of the way that servers are shared, the access is controlled. It's pretty rare that there's any opportunity for dealership data to bleed into other dealers. It's pretty much unheard of. It might have been more possible 15 years ago, but not so much today.
Again, thank you for pointing out that I'm old. So it's my data, and I don't have to worry about somebody else having access to my data without authorization.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Great. We've got another question here. Someone's asking, how much time is involved in conversion?
From John and I, we've got enough experience from multiple different software providers. It depends on what is going on. And the reason I say that is I've watched people convert to ERP level systems and take months or years to convert data and not be told up front. That's one of those things, again, that provider doesn't say, oh, by the way, you need to outline 1,000 different types of transactions that could happen on your system and tell me the GL mapping of every one of them. That takes a long time. So that's the worst case with ERPs. In the DIS space, I would say that the conversion is typically done in a matter of days, meaning you get a cutoff point, convert all the necessary data, input the work in process over the course of a couple, 3 days, and then run live after that. So there's typically a short period that doesn't include the training involved prior to that go live cutoff, and obviously the week and the month after going live. There's always training involved as people get used to the new system, new software. But the conversion itself really should be able to take place over a course of a couple, 3 days, and quite often over a weekend-ish for the most part.
So I'm going to offer a commentary on something that I used to get a question about all the time, and I don't know that it's as prevalent now, but a lot of times people will say, hey, is there an opportunity that I can run tandem or parallel systems? Because I want to make sure that everything balances out the right way, and I want to make sure that everybody understands transactions, and that it's just a validation or verification. And I'm assuming, Lloyd, the answer is still no, because what happens is very quickly you lose track of who is the master and who is the slave. Which transaction systems update at different times, systems process information differently. Account numbers may not match completely going across both systems. History may or may not be relevant.
And there's two reasons why. You're right on all those counts, absolutely. But there's two reasons why parallel systems typically are a bad idea. And one is the actual commitment to the change, because everybody involved at every level of our organization is going to look at that and go, well, I'm running parallel, so I don't really need to understand and use the new system. That's just the way the human subconscious works. That's a very bad idea. And the second reason why it's a bad idea, to be blunt, is the sheer work involved is insane. Most dealers today don't have enough staff to be on top of everything they need to get done every day. When you say, by the way, that same staff is going to have to do double the work because we're going to ask them to do it both in a new system and an old system, that's not usually a workable scenario at all. It's just too much work involved.
Oh yeah, and depending on how they hold work in process, how they hold, inventory, the way that costing is done, things like that, trying to get two systems to balance at any given point in time is pretty near impossible.
Yes.
But the question still comes up regularly if whether or not I can do it. But
it's because it's a safety element. It's because there's some voice telling that dealer, well, I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work. Well, then they've got to talk to other people that have done that conversion. They've got to talk to the company they're dealing with to say, give me a proof of what's going to happen. And they got to feel comfortable that that commitment is there. So when go live starts, they're in new system and old system is turned off.
So suffice it to say, if somebody comes up and says, oh yeah, we've converted hundreds of these, easy peasy, we shut you off, run you through a process, you're back up and running the next morning. And I know from my experience, it never quite happens that way.
It can't. And anybody that's telling you that, you can quote me from earlier in this discussion, is likely to fib about other things too.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I get it. We so far, this is what I've got. I've got that changing systems is difficult. You have to have a cost and benefit analysis done to why you want to change systems. You have to watch your contracts and make sure that you're getting into bed with somebody who doesn't want to handcuff you. I'm not sure I want to say that way, but there's got to be a better terminology for that. You have to make sure that you're not contracted into the point where you can't get out, and you want to be allowed to speak freely about your experience. Is that a close summary?
Yep, that works.
Okay.
Great. That was all of the questions that I think we have for now. So thank you, John and Lloyd, for the very insightful conversation. And thanks to everyone who took the time to join today. All right, perfect. Thanks, Lloyd's got the contact information up on the screen. So if you have any questions or you're interested in learning more about our products and services, or anything else comes to mind after this discussion and you'd like to reach out and learn more about it, please do reach out to the DIS sales team. And you will receive an email within the next 24 hours with the webinar recording, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. And once you leave this webinar, a survey will pop up on your screen, and we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to answer the questions, because it helps us plan future webinars like these. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, John and Lloyd, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.